Those of you who travel for work understand the feeling of arriving at yet another hotel room in a city you'd rather not be in. Maybe it's just that I'm cautious or that I don't trust people easily. After checking out the room, I put my bag down and checked the minibar seals. I'm not about to pay those insane hotel prices for a tiny bottle of alcohol, even if it's on the company dime. Next, I checked the room's cleanliness, the bed, the towels. A flashy lobby and efficient reception don't always mean the staff has done their job elsewhere. Once I confirmed the bed linen was clean, I took a quick look under the bed. I started doing this after hearing about a guy in Atlanta who found a dead body under his hotel bed. I didn't expect to find a corpse, but I won't say what I have found under hotel beds since I started checking. Don't worry though, I reformatted the hard drive, and my son loves the iPod, even if I did have to buy new earphones. Finally, after making sure there's hot and cold water running in the bathroom and that the telephone works, it's time to turn on the TV. It's always good to check the phone first, because if the TV doesn't work, shouting into a dead phone can be maddening. Not that I watch TV much, but it's nice to have some background noise, especially if the neighbors are loud. Some budget hotels have walls so thin that I can hear everything going on next door, and I don't need to hear a couple trying to break the bed. Everything checked out fine in this place. It usually does, but as I mentioned, I'm cautious, so I have to check. I was particularly annoyed because I didn't want to spend another night away from my wonderful wife, Michelle. Yeah, Michelle isn't a common name, but her mother was Italian. Michelle's father was a pilot who was shot down during the war, and her mother's family hid him from the enemy and nursed him back to health before helping him escape to Switzerland. After the war, he went back and married Michelle's mother and brought her to the U.S. The trouble with Michelle's name is that there isn't an easy way to shorten it, so she became Shelley to me most of the time. I left the TV on while I showered and changed. When I came out of the bathroom, the local news was just starting, so I switched the TV to a different channel for national news. Same old thing, politicians droning on about some global crisis and hinting at war. They call it peacekeeping, but don't those fools realize that our people are getting hurt out there? It's all a ploy to keep voters distracted so they won't notice the mess politicians are making back home. Since I can't stand their nonsense, I turned the volume down and called Shelley on my mobile. I refuse to pay the extortionate prices for hotel phone calls, and besides, I have speed dial on my phone. There was no answer from our home phone, so I called Shelley's mobile. As usual, it rang for a while before she picked up. I could just picture her rummaging through that handbag of hers trying to find it. I never understood how she could fit so much in there. It was like a black hole. "Hi, darling, did you arrive okay?" Shelley finally answered. "Yeah, fine, Shelley. The traffic was awful on the highway as usual, and I got delayed a bit. The hotel room's not bad. I've seen worse. Where are you, by the way?" I called the home phone first. "I'm over at Karen's. Didn't see the point in going home to an empty house again." "Why?" "Oh, just curious. That's all." I should have guessed Shelley would be at Karen's. The two of them are inseparable and have been ever since I met Shelley at Karen's wedding. Karen's husband, Tom, is my best mate David's younger brother. Over the years, Tom and I have become closer because of the girls' close friendship. Shelley mentioned she was having dinner with Karen and Tom, and might stay over since there wasn't much point in going home to an empty house. Shelley had stayed over at their place before when I'd been away, so it wasn't really a surprise. After we exchanged the usual sweet words and I told Shelley I'd see her the following evening, we ended the call, and I headed down to the restaurant for dinner. The menu didn't offer much that caught my eye, so I opted for my usual steak, which I had to send back once because it wasn't cooked to my liking. I can be a bit of a pain when I want to be, especially when I'm away from Shelley. I get so annoyed that I look for anything to vent my frustration on. After my meal, I went to the bar. With any luck, there'd be some nice scenery there that night. As I entered, I figured the evening could be interesting, if nothing else. The first person I noticed was a woman sitting at the bar, sizing up everyone who walked in. At one of the tables were 4 women, a bit older, who looked like they were on a girls' night out. A couple of salesmen kept asking them to dance, and although the women took turns, it seemed the guys were on a losing streak. Those 4 were going home to their loving husbands untouched, which they did later when one of their husbands arrived to take them home. I assumed it was a husband if it wasn't. Those 4 were capable of handling him. There were a few couples in groups sitting around, including one pair that looked like honeymooners. I hope they weren't in the room next to mine. There were also 2 separate couples whom I suspected were having affairs. The age differences didn't seem right. But then again, the women might have just been companions. I don't speculate about companions. Some people say they're all in it for the money. But I know a couple who aren't. They're just good kids trying to get through college without a huge debt. Live and let live, I say. There were a couple of ladies on their own besides the woman at the bar, and quite a few single men and small groups of salesmen and workers away from home for the night. By watching them, I could tell some were on the prowl while others were just having a quiet drink before spending a lonely night in a strange bed. I hadn't seen her in the restaurant, but when she walked into that bar, everyone noticed her. God, she glided into the place like she wasn't touching the floor. She stopped and looked around nervously, as though she wasn't sure what to do next, then headed for the bar and took a stool not far from the woman who was now in conversation with a rather large guy. I assumed they were discussing business. No sooner had the woman sat down at the bar than the first guy arrived at her side. A bit premature, I think, but this woman was one of those who make happily married men wish they weren't happily married. She politely refused his offer of a drink. I would have loved to hear what she said to him. Whatever it was, he quickly retreated. How to describe this woman who grabbed every guy's attention when she walked through that door? She wasn't a young girl. I'd say she was about Shelley's age, 34. She had medium-length chestnut hair and was wearing that killer outfit, the LBD little black dress, for those unfamiliar with the term. That dress showed off her figure perfectly and ended just below the knee. As she perched on the bar stool, the LBD rose just enough to make every guy in the place take a deep breath. The heeled shoes she wore were just high enough to add some shape to her calves. Damn it, the woman had presence. If she had been younger, I would have taken her for another companion like I thought the 2 other attractive women in the bar were, but there was something about her that said she wasn't. She had an air about her that told you she wasn't used to entering a bar on her own. Any guy who got his hooks into her would be a fool to let her out on her own anywhere wolves might be lurking. Having purchased her drink from the now beaming bartender, where had that sullen face that served me gone, the woman looked around for a vacant table. To my displeasure, she chose the one next to mine. Why was I unhappy about that? I enjoy looking at beautiful women, don't we all? Sorry, all men. There could be some ladies reading this. Anyway, with her sitting so close to me, I couldn't admire her without making it obvious. She hadn't been sitting there very long before another guy approached her and asked if she'd like to dance. She politely refused, and he retreated, only to be replaced by a third guy who wasn't going to give up so easily. When she refused his request to dance, he offered to buy her a drink. Actually, I think this guy had indulged a little too much that evening. He sat himself down at her table and continued his clumsy attempts at seduction. This was my cue to play the knight in shining armor. Well, not immediately. I had to let him raise the woman's anxiety level a little first. He'll point out that I had no intention of doing anything inappropriate that evening, being a married man and all, but enjoying this lady's company for a few drinks would take the edge off an otherwise boring and lonely night. My timing had to be just right, though there were other gentlemen besides me in that bar, and I needed to get in fast to achieve my goal. When I noticed the movement of another guy on the other side of the room, I turned in my seat and stepped in. Look, pal, the lady obviously isn't enjoying your company or your unwanted attention. Now please go away before you upset her any more than you already have. It took the guy a couple of moments to refocus his eyes on me. The drink does that to some folks. Even in his inebriated condition, I could see that he still had the sense to consider what a confrontation could lead to. "What's it got to do with you?" he finally asked. "The lady is a friend of mine, and I don't like to see my friends getting upset. I, on the other hand, am already pretty upset, so if you aren't going to leave on your own, I'll be glad to help you." I began to rise from my seat, but at that moment another guy, obviously a colleague of the drunk, appeared and persuaded him that they really needed to be somewhere else. "I'm sorry about that," his friend said to me as he led him away. "He doesn't handle his drink too well. Don't apologize to me. It was the lady he was upsetting," I replied as they left, heading towards the bar's entrance. Now standing, I turned back to the lady. "Sorry about that. Some people have no manners." "Thank you. I never know what to say around drunk people. They don't take the hint very easily." "My pleasure, ma'am. Now, if you don't think I'm being too forward, may I offer to buy you a drink?" But before you answer, I held up my ring finger to display my wedding band. I'm a very happily married man, and I intend to stay that way. She smiled back at me. "Well, now you do lay your cards on the table. I'd hate anyone to get the wrong idea. A little light conversation is all I'm looking for when I'm away from home. She must be some woman. Oh, she is. Half Italian, half Irish. The Italian half gives her looks and passion. The Irish half is where her wit and determination come from. She can stretch $1 from here to eternity." "I'll have a gin and tonic, if I may," the lady said, moving along the sofa she was sitting on, and making it clear where she wanted me to sit when I returned with the drinks. "John Randall, at your service," I said as I sat beside her, holding my hand out to her as I did so. A little over the top, but who cares? "I'm pleased to meet you, John. I'm Natalie Hayes. My friends call me Nat. What brings you to this lovely town tonight, Nat?" "God, it is a charming place, isn't it? I live out in the country, well, in a small town anyway. And if you must know the bank manager." I suddenly wondered what I'd walked into. Why would she be in town to see the bank manager? Nat must have seen the confusion on my face, so she went on. "We, or rather I now, since I was recently widowed, run a small gas station. No, damn it, it's just a filling station. Since my husband died, he ran the workshop, and I ran the filling station part. Anyway, it costs a lot of money to keep the tanks filled, and I have the most dreadful overdraft. Our bank is here in town, and I have to come up to see the bank manager every 6 months or so he can look at the books. Really, I think it's so he can charge me another $100 for the interview, where he tries to make me feel like a child. Ah, I've met the sort, full of their own importance. Do you run a large overdraft?" "No, I'm a security consultant. They like to play the I am smarter than you game, but I like to point out the holes in their security. Brings them down to size a bit. But if you're here, who's running your gas station?" "My children. Anna is 17, and she looks after most things while I'm away. Peter will be on the console tonight. He's 15 and insists on doing his share once he gets home from school. He wants to train as a mechanic and reopen the workshop when he finishes his education." "Looks like you've got a couple of good kids there. Do you have any children?" "Yes, and talk about coincidences. I have a son of 18 who's away at engineering college. His name's Michael, but he's known as Mick at home. You know how the Italians pronounce it. It's spelled the English way, but my wife is strong on her Italian heritage. And we have a daughter of 15 who's at boarding school. Oh, I wouldn't like my children to go away to school. It's not Shelley's or my choice either. Danielle is a bit of a virtuoso on the violin. I'm not into all this classical stuff, but we had to let her go where she could develop her skills to their best advantage. She claims she misses her brother and us, but from reading the few letters we get, I think she's having a great time there, although she calls her mother all the time. Does your wife miss having the children at home?" "I'm not sure. I suppose she does, but since we've had the house to ourselves, she gets a little wild around the house sometimes. It's a bit like it was when we were first married. I don't think I should go into details." "No, I don't think you should either. Anyway, Shelley's into just about every charity there is around. She and her best friend Karen are always on one committee or another when they're not working. I get dragged off to one fundraiser after another. For the next couple of hours, Nat and I talked about our lives, and I'll be honest, what I thought was going to be a drag of an evening turned out to be good fun. Funny how we just clicked together, and I could also understand how some guys could easily stray from the righteous path. I've got to say that I could feel there could have been some chemistry there. I escorted Nat up to her room. Well, not exactly to her room. I got out of the elevator on her floor, and after saying good night, I watched her as she walked down the corridor to her room, went inside, and closed the door. All right, if you insist. She did give me a little peck on the cheek and thank me for a wonderful evening, but it was just a friendly peck. I was surprised to find it was well past midnight when I got back to my room. In less than a couple of minutes, I was in the land of dreams. What a shame that you can't always remember your dreams. It must have been a good one. I woke up excited in the morning, not unusual when I'm at home with Shelley, but unusual for me when I'm on the road. I hadn't been sitting in the dining room for long eating my breakfast when I was pleasantly surprised by Nat joining me at my table. I'm damned if I can remember what we talked about over our meal, but again, it made a change from being alone. It was almost 9 when we said our goodbyes, and Nat dashed off to her room to get ready for her meeting. I had no rush because I couldn't get into the place I was checking out until 10 at the earliest. It was only going to be a cursory inspection anyway. I was in one of the other guy's territories, and he'd given the place a once-over a few weeks back. The idea was that no one there knew me from Adam, and I was going to see if they closed the holes that my colleague had spotted. Back alone in my room, I switched on the TV for some company while I read through my colleague's report again. Had advised that brown overalls should make me invisible as that was the color the company issued to its workers. He also suggested what gate I could possibly slip in through. It was as I was struggling into the boiler suit that I heard the news at the end of the breakfast show, and it grabbed my attention. It was the name of my local town that caught my ear. I lived in a small town, and hearing it mentioned on national news was a surprise to me. Apparently, there had been a serious fire at the big hotel in town during the night. It was a huge Victorian structure, far bigger than the town needed nowadays. But as our town was once at the junction between 2 different railway companies, folks used to stop overnight quite often back in the old days. The screen suddenly changed from a picture of the reporter standing in front of the smoldering building to footage of the night's events. What the hell was a TV film crew doing in our small town? I couldn't understand. But their presence there was about to change my life. The reporter was talking about how many fire crews had been in attendance, and the picture changed to footage of the night's events. First, shots of the windows and roof with flames roaring through them, and then to one of those giant cherry pickers the fire brigade uses to rescue people nowadays. As the camera zoomed in on the casualties being lowered to the ground, my heart seemed to stop. There was my Shelley climbing out of the gondola, dressed in what looked like little more than a hotel bathrobe, assisted by David, who was dressed the same way. Their faces were obscured by the plastic oxygen masks they were both wearing, but Shelley was hanging on to that damn little handbag of hers, and I'd know David anywhere. We'd been friends since our first day at elementary school. Looked to me like we weren't friends any longer. I'm not quite sure how I didn't throw the TV set out of the window, but somehow I managed to control myself. I picked up my phone and called Karen's house. I figured that's where Shelley would be if she wasn't in the hospital or at work, but I doubted she'd be there after the night she'd obviously had. As I guessed, Karen hadn't left for work either. I heard her say "shush" to silence the other voices in the room as she picked up the handset. Funny, I could also hear the same news broadcast playing on her television in the background. Handy, because they must have seen the same piece of film I did. "Hello," Karen said, I think a little hesitantly. "Hello, Karen. Not going to work this morning?" Karen put her hand over the mouthpiece. I heard the noises that doing that makes. Then she came back on, now sounding very frightened. "No, I'm not feeling well today. What can I do for you, John? Well, you can tell that lady to get all of her things out of my house before I get back this evening to start with. Tell her I'll be filing for a divorce today. And you better tell that brother-in-law of yours that he'd better start running the other way if he sees me in the future. But no excuses, Karen. I've just been watching the same news program you have, so don't try giving me any nonsense. And I think you and Tom better stay away from me as well. You must have known all about what those two have been getting up to behind my back. Honestly, John, it's not what you think it is. Bullocks, Karen. Two people, dressed except for bathrobes, at 4 a.m. What kind of person do you take me for? Now make sure she's out of my house before I get home tonight. I think you should speak to Shelley, John. Bullocks, I said, and hit the disconnect button as quickly as I could. I went through my phone's address book and placed a second call. Carter and Fields, good morning, an efficient voice answered. Hi, beautiful, it's John Randall. Is Derek in yet? Yes, he's just come in. You want to speak to him. You know he hasn't had his morning coffee yet. Tell the person I'm going to put some money in his pocket. That'll make him take the call. I heard the phone switch to hold, and then the click as Derek came on the line. What time of day do you call this? I've only just walked in the door. Time for you to earn some money, Derek. Tell me, what do you know about Shelley and David? I don't like the sound of that question, John. Why should I know something? So you aren't aware that David's been seeing Shelley then? Jesus, John, of course I didn't know. You're a friend of mine. Christ, we went to school together. So did David, but that hasn't stopped him from seeing my partner. Are you sure about this, John? As sure as I can be. There was film of the pair being rescued from the old hotel last night, shown all over the TV this morning. All they had on were bathrobes. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. Shelley climbing out of the rescue cage wasn't far short of a dramatic scene. Oh, shit. We better try and get our hands on a copy of that. I wonder if they will repeat it later so we can record it. Leave that to me, Derek. You just get the divorce in gear. Aren't you being a bit hasty, John? Have you talked to Shelley yet? Look, Derek, there's nothing to talk about. I spent last night sitting in a hotel bar talking to every man's dream of a woman. I had breakfast with her this morning as well. John, should you be telling me this? Listen, mate, I haven't finished yet. Look, this woman was what all those dreams you have are made out of. She's a widow. Well, she claimed to be. Thinking about it, I'd better cover my back there just in case Shelley and David are playing dirty. Sorry. Don't worry about it, Derek. The point is I slept on my own last night. I didn't do anything I should be ashamed of. But while I was, Shelley and David were making something in the old hotel. So get that paperwork started. As you wish, John. I'll get Carol on it right away. The call to Derek was over. My next couple of calls were to the bank and credit card companies. Screw the situation. I canceled everything. I'd run on my company credit card until I had time to sort things out. Shelley could get her hands on the money in the current account, but there wasn't much in there to worry about. My next call was to the TV company. It took me a little time to get through to the person I wanted as she was still in the control room. Sharon, it's John Randall. Sharon is another old school friend. Handy in a way that she was one of the maybes when I first hooked up with Shelley. I know Sharon had a crush on me back then, and I was hoping she still held a grudge against Shelley for winning the race. Oh, so you saw it? Yep, sure did. And I've already done, John. I've got a DVD in my handbag now. 2 copies, actually. One for you and one for your solicitor. Ah, you anticipated my request. Damn it, John. If you hadn't seen it on the news, I intended to send the thing to you. But please be careful who you show it to. There are 2 files on the disc. One called Broadcast you can show to anyone, as you could have grabbed it from any TV set. And the other one is the rest of the film that the crew took during the night. If you show that around too much, it could get awkward for me. There's some more shots of the pair together, kind of candid-like. I'll be honest with you, it was seeing that candid stuff that got me out of my spot. Thanks, Sharon. Looks like I picked the wrong girl all those years ago. Would be interesting to live our lives over again, wouldn't it, John? But I've been happy with the person I finished up with. But a person can dream about what might have been. Look, I'm assuming you're going to use Derek. Sure am. He's already on the case. Right. I'll drop these discs off at his house on my way home later. He doesn't live far from me. It'll give me a chance to catch up with Angela and the children at the same time. I hardly ever get to see her nowadays. Well, except for a few more pleasantries. That was the end of that call. That only left me with one more thing to do. Find out whether Natalie Hayes was who and what she claimed to be, and cover my back in case she wasn't. At the hotel reception desk, I asked to see the manager and introduced myself to him. The sight of my business card brought a smile to his face. The company I work for had supplied the hotel's video security system. He was just a little hesitant to let me take copies of the hard drives from the time I entered the hotel, but once I explained that there was a remote possibility that someone was trying to set me up, he acquiesced. I retrieved the equipment I needed from my car and copied the previous 24 hours of recordings to DVDs. I knew that the hotel would do the same thing themselves at the end of the week, so I would have verification that the recordings hadn't been tampered with. Yeah, that can happen. My review, or rather test, of the client's security went off not too well for them. I slipped in the gate while a truck was being checked in. The poor security guy was on his own and couldn't watch the monitors and be outside checking the truck in. I just walked past on the other side of it. Once inside, the overalls without any logos on them meant that no one had any idea I shouldn't have been there. You can guess how it went. A typical company losing stock and money through petty pilfering because they are too tight to spend a little cash and employ enough security staff. Drive back home. It was almost 4 when, approaching the service station, I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Not that I'm keen on service station food, but God in heaven knew what was going to happen when I got home. If Shelley was about, or even David, I could end up cooling my heels in the slammer for the night. So I pulled in to eat something. You know, I did see the National Express bus parked in the coach park. Being observant, they call it in my business. We learned to be observant, but if I was that good at it, how come I'd never seen any sign that David and Shelley were getting close? Anyway, I didn't think about that bus until Nat popped her backside on the seat opposite me as I was eating my meal. Hi, stranger. We keep on running into each other, it seems. On your way home now. Oh, hello. And what are you doing in here? Trying for food poisoning? Yeah, a bit near the mark, isn't it? I think most of it looks like it was cooked yesterday. No, I wouldn't eat here by choice, but the bus takes a half-hour break here. They changed drivers or something. Anyway, what made you stop here? I'd have thought you could wait to get home to that partner of yours. Ex-partner, Nat. Nat went quiet for a few moments, as if she was trying to take in what I just said. What do you mean your ex-partner? I gave Nat a rundown of the morning's events, and while I was doing so, the bus driver called for the passengers to get back on board. I'm not sure how it happened, but I discovered that Nat lived about 20 miles from my house, so I offered to drop her off home. I'm going to be honest, I needed someone I could talk to. And besides that, if she didn't live where she'd claimed the night before, I would soon find out. I forced myself to eat a rather unappetizing meal as we talked, and then we got back on the road again. Nat didn't say much during the journey, but she made a very good listener. It was 5:30 when I pulled onto the forecourt of her filling station. I filled the car's fuel tank while I was there, just as a kind of thank you for Nat's company. She introduced me to her son and daughter, both of whom gave me the kind of protective looks I would have expected from children worried about their recently widowed mother, and I listened as Nat told them that her overdraft had been approved for the next 6 months. Then, after drinking a cup of coffee with them, I left for the drive home. Yep, I wasn't going to get away easily. I knew that when I pulled into my driveway, Shelley's car was parked in her usual spot, and there were lights on in the house. I sat there for a few minutes, contemplating how to handle this meeting, but then an idea struck me, and I called Derek on the mobile. "You home, mate?" I asked when Derek answered his mobile. "Yeah, been home an hour or so. Did you get a chance to look at those DVDs that Sharon dropped off?" "Unfortunately, yes, John. And they are bad news." "Well, good news for your divorce case, but bad news for Shelley. Nothing more than a little kissing and cuddling, but add that to the way they are dressed, and no judge is going to believe he was just comforting her after a bad experience. It's in the bag as far as you are concerned." "Oh, I'm looking into an alienation of affection case against David. Not a very common case to bring nowadays, but if you're as upset as you sounded this morning, you might like to give it a try. Go for it if you think it will nail him. That person was supposed to be my friend. I think he's going to be surprised how many folks he's upset by what he's done. It'll be funny if he tries to turn up for golf on Sunday." "Why is that?" "Well, his regular golfing includes my partner, Larry. He's already told the guys that if David plays, he won't." "Oh, don't worry. He didn't tell them why. But David is going to be out of the club completely in a week or so anyway. You know he's up before the committee for that argument he had with that visiting player at the tournament the other week. Well, he's charged with ungentlemanly conduct, and as Larry's on the committee, well, bugger as Larry put it, what's more bloody ungentlemanly than seducing another member's wife?" I smiled to myself as the call ended. David getting thrown out of the golf club was only going to be the first of the repercussions he was going to suffer. What the hell was his wife going to say when the truth comes out? No, I had no intention of calling David's wife. I like the girl, she would find out soon enough what had been going on inside the house. I found Shelley sitting in the kitchen crying. Well, apparently so. For all I knew, she could have been acting. "What are you doing here, Shelley?" I asked in as hard a tone as I could muster. Look, this woman had been and still was the love of my life, and when she cried, I cried inside as well. "I live here, and I need to talk to you." "You do not live here any longer, but if you wish to talk, I'll give you 10 minutes, and then I'll pick you up and throw you out." Suddenly, Shelley was not crying anymore. The look she gave me was one of shock. "You wouldn't." "Shelley, have I ever lied to you?" She sat even more upright as she understood that I meant what I said. "But I'm your wife. You can't throw me out like that. You were my wife until I discovered you've been seeing David." Funny how I couldn't bring myself to say seeing. "But I love you. You can't throw me out." "You love me." "Did love you, you mean?" "I'm not going to love any woman who takes me for a fool." "How long have you two been seeing each other?" It was one hell of a strain to say that. "We haven't." "Bullocks, Shelley. What are you going to claim you were doing in that hotel room with David?" "Playing Monopoly. And from what I've heard, the two of you were all over each other in that ambulance." Shelley switched the tears back on, but I ignored them and filled the kettle. Bullocks to it, I fancied a cup of tea. Once Shelley realized I was ignoring her, I think she began to understand that I wasn't playing games. "I'm sorry, John. It was the first time, honestly." "Bullocks." It was honestly. "I don't believe you, Shelley, and by tomorrow, I'll have all the proof I need. I'll have some more of these, and I'll know all about every time you've seen David, and whoever else he's seen in that old hotel as well." Shelley looked up at me again, and I think the penny really dropped when she saw the DVDs I was holding. I think she suddenly remembered that I'd gotten a nice commission check when I'd sold the surveillance system to the old hotel. I didn't have to worry about the fire. The computers themselves were in a water and fireproof cabinet in the basement. I knew that we'd soon be going through them to check whether there was any evidence that the fire had been arson. Standard procedure nowadays. The insurance companies gave the client discounts when our systems were installed. Okay, but it was only the second time. Only the second time. The first damn time was enough for you to be out that door. But it was only nothing. David doesn't mean anything to me. Why should you get so upset if I do something you've always done? What the hell are you talking about? Well, you mess about with people when you're out of town. I never got all up with you about it. I don't know where you've got that idea from, but I've done nothing I'm ashamed of when I've been away. And I've never jumped into any strange person's bed. Besides dishonoring you, God knows what a guy could pick up. There's diseases and all kinds of things out there, you know. But David said, "Oh hell. Girl, just how thick are you? Christ, I thought I knew you, but it seems like I never have. Tell me something. I know David always had a thing for you. Well, let's say I've always had the feeling he'd like to get close to you. How long has the person been trying to chat you up?" "Well, he always has been, really. It's just I thought he was only being friendly." "So David tells you that I've had a one-night stand or something and you jump into bed with him. You couldn't wait to ask me about it. You just couldn't wait to get the person first." "No, John, it wasn't like that. David told me a long time ago about you and some girl you slept with when you were in Los Angeles last year. And how the hell would David know what I did or didn't do in Los Angeles? You told him when you were out together one night." "Bullocks, Shelley. David lied to you, probably so he could get into bed with you, and you fell for it. Look, I'll show you how I spend the nights when I'm away. And this was a good evening for me. I put my laptop computer on the table and fired it up, putting one of the DVDs from the hotel in the drive. I loaded the surveillance program and started hunting for the scenes I wanted. Here, look, notice the good-looking woman. Remind you of anyone? Yourself, maybe. I thought she looked a lot like you. There'd see, some drunk is giving her some grief, trying to chat her up, probably hoping he was going to get lucky like David did with his nonsense. That's not a nice thing to say. Sometimes the truth hurts. Now look, here's your once loving husband coming to the lady's assistance. The altercation, well, what there was of it, was almost over before you could actually see that it was me standing there. Look closely as I make a point of showing the lady my wedding ring. I'm telling her I'm happily married there because I didn't want any misunderstandings. I switched the playback to high speed, only slowing it down to point out the time when I got the photos of Shelley and the children out to show Nat. Then it was high speed until we left the bar together. Changing the disc, Shelley watched as Nat and I went up in the elevator together. Then she saw Nat give me that innocent peck on the cheek and heard her thank me for a pleasant evening before she walked down the corridor on her own and entered her room. A little more hunting around, and I showed Shelley that I entered my room alone, and I left it running at high speed to prove I never came out of the room until morning. Tell me, does that look like a husband who cheats on his wife? Nat was a nice woman and lonely as well. Her husband died only 8 months ago. I'd say she was just about ripe for someone like David to take advantage of. But I ain't David. Now, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it if you pack your things and get out of this house. John, you can't mean that. Where would I go? Hell, if I know or care. I stopped caring when I saw the news this morning. Now pack and go before I lose control of myself. You can't mean that, John. We've been married nearly 20 years. Pity you didn't remember that last night or even the first time you let that person get close to you. Perhaps David's partner will let you stay with them. Did you think about her whilst he was seeing you? Please don't. Who's talking? You made your bed, girl. Now go and lie in it. Look, I'm going down to the pub for a while. When I get back, please be out of this house. I heard her call out John as I walked out of the house. Locking my computer back into the trunk of my car, I walked down to the pub where I had a bit to drink. It was nearly 11 when I returned home. Shelley's car was gone, and the house looked dark and empty as I went in the door. I found myself greeted by the insistent ringing of the telephone. "Mr. Randall?" a voice asked when I lifted the receiver. "Yes, Mark Thornton, head teacher at the music academy here. I'm afraid we have a problem. Danielle has absconded." "What?" "She wasn't in her room at the 10:30 room check. All students are supposed to be in their dorm blocks by 10 o'clock at the latest. Danielle was not there." "Oh, I should imagine she's out with some friends somewhere and just lost track of the time. Kids nowadays have no idea." "No, Mr. Randall. She was seen getting into a car with a young man at about 8 o'clock. We have recordings of her on the video on that system your company supplied. It's a very good system, you know. It saved us panicking more than once. Her friend said she'd been in a strange mood all day, so they haven't seen much of her. But when we saw her getting in that car, well, we had to call the police and you. This could be very serious. What kind of car? A small one with a boy racer type of paint job. I'm afraid I'm not up to much on car models. Flames on the wheel arches and a dragon painted across the hood. Yes, I think so. Do you know the vehicle? Tell me, Mr. Thornton. Do your students watch breakfast television? Well, they can. There are televisions in the dorm lounges. I suppose there's plenty of time for them to watch between breakfast and the first lesson. I think you'd better call off the hounds, Professor. We've had a domestic problem here at home, and I think we are soon going to find out that Danielle and her brother are on their way home to try and help sort it out. I'd appreciate it if you placed Danielle on compassionate leave for a few days. You're sure it was her brother in the car? As sure as I can be. There can't be many cars like that around. What time did you say they left? It says 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock on the screen. They should be here very shortly then. If my son drives as he normally does, he's quite conscientious behind the wheel. I'll let you know when they get here. If you're sure, Mr. Randall, I'll call the police off and leave it in your hands. It was about 20 minutes later when that noisy exhaust pulled into the drive. The children found the front door open for them on the latch. Daddy, where's Mommy? My daughter asked as she came into the kitchen where I was sitting, waiting for them. I haven't the faintest idea, and I don't give a damn, I replied. You saw the news this morning then? My son Mick asked. I assume you two did as well. I didn't. Danielle did, and she called me to ask me what we should do. I thought we'd better have a long talk with Mother. A bit late for long talks with her, I'm afraid. She's gone. I've thrown her out. But you can't throw her out just like that. This is her home, Danielle exclaimed. Oh, but I can, and she knows it. We don't own this house. It's held in a family trust. I can live in it until I die. If your mother was married to me, which she won't be for very much longer, she could live out her life in it. Then either of you who wish to live in it could have it. If you don't want to live here, it will go to my sister or one of her children. You see, whatever happens after the divorce, your mother has no claim on this house. She can go and stay with her boyfriend. But Uncle David's married. Please don't call him Uncle David in my presence, Mick. Once I've divorced your mother and David's wife has divorced him. Then if the two decide to set up house together and get married, you can call him Dad or whatever you like. But in my presence, don't call him anything. I'm sorry, Dad, but all they'll ever call him is a terrible person for what he and Mother have done to our family. It looked to me like Danielle had cried herself out on the long journey home, but I had a job for her to perform. Now, young lady, you had better get on that telephone and call Professor Thornton and let him know you've arrived home safely. You've nearly given the poor man a heart attack. I could see that Danielle wasn't too pleased at my request. So could her brother, and it was he who stepped up to the plate. I'll call him if you like, Danielle. I should have known better than to take you away without his permission, Mick said as he left the room to call from the lounge telephone. If you need it, you should be able to use ringback. I called out to him as he went. But where is Mother, Dad? Danielle asked again. I told you I don't know, and I don't care. Call her on her mobile if you want to know so badly, but don't be surprised if a man answers. Danielle got out her mobile, and I noticed her turn it on. The academy kept calling me. She explained sheepishly. Mother, how could you do this to us? Danielle suddenly demanded into the phone. Then there were a few moments of silence before she continued. I've never been so upset in my life. Is that supposed to be an excuse? Because it doesn't wash with me. No, I'm home with Daddy, and so is Mick. No, he didn't call us. I saw you on the television this morning. I nearly died. It was obvious you were unprepared under that bathrobe. It was upsetting. Luckily, none of my friends at the academy recognized you, though. I'd never be able to look them in the face again. No, I don't want to see you or speak to you for the time being anyway. I just wanted to know where you were and that you were safe. I think Mick and I will stay with Dad for a few days to make sure he's all right. You should have thought about that yesterday, Mother. It's all a bit late now, isn't it? And Mother, just in case you're wondering, Mick and I had plenty of opportunity to talk on the way back home. We both think we'll be staying with Father if he allows us. It's a bit late for crying, Mother. Isn't that what you always told us when we were younger? I'd better go now. I'm not sure how much credit I have on this phone, and honestly, I could say something I'll regret later. You'll have to call Mick and ask him, won't you? Goodbye, Mother. Danielle disconnected the call. A little harsh on her, weren't you? I asked. No, Father. Nowhere near as harsh as I would have been a few hours ago. I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't found out already. Mick and I have been in a complete dilemma about whether we would be able to live with not telling you. I think the only way we could get away with that was never to come home again. Well, we came home so you know what we intended to do and how angry we are with Mother. She is your mother, Danielle, no matter what she's done. Oh, we still love her, but we don't have to like her or what she's done to you, to our family. Mick suddenly called for Danielle to join him in the lounge. I think the professor wanted a word with her. She left me alone with my thoughts. Over the next few days, things got a little hectic. There were phone calls from Shelley's sister and a couple of friends. Unfortunately, I think just about everyone had seen that news report, and there wasn't much they could say. Shelley found herself a solicitor who was pretty quick to try and argue over the house. Once Derek informed him about the conditions of the trust, he went quiet on that one. Shelley got half, so she thought, of our net worth. The trust's existence should set you wise to the fact that my family has always been a little smart when it comes to money. There are quite a few foreign investments that the profits from are paid into offshore numbered bank accounts. To be honest, I'm not sure I know how much money there really is stashed away here and there. Still, what the taxman doesn't know about, he can't waste on making war, can he? Before the divorce was final, David had a nasty accident. Very strange that one was. Mick insisted that I accompany him that day. I never could understand why he wanted to sit in the magistrate's court all morning. Several times he made comments that the magistrate almost threw him out over. It struck me later that those magistrates and the policemen on duty that day weren't going to forget us in a hurry. I don't suppose it was just a coincidence that someone chose that morning to kick David and throw him down the stairs in the town's multi-story car park. To be honest, he might have fallen down the stairs as he was trying to get away. The other strange thing was that David's wife sat in that magistrate's court the same morning as well. You know, I always did think that some of Mick's friends were a little questionable when he was younger. Shelley lived with Karen and Tom for a while, and then apparently something happened. I don't know what it was, but I do know they don't speak to each other anymore. Tom and David were very similar characters, so I have to wonder. No, that's speculation and not being completely fair on Shelley. She lived in a little apartment after that. I never went there, but the children said it was a real mess. Shelley did try to contact me on several occasions. I know she was hoping for a reconciliation. I suppose there might have been a faint chance, but for the fact she chose the wrong night to go out with some friends from work. She told the children later that it was the first time she'd had the courage to show her face in town. Unfortunately, she drank a little too much. Shelley never could handle her drink very well, and she bumped into me and the young lady I was on the dance floor with. Shelley, for some reason, was furious that I was dancing with another woman. She accused us of spending time together, embarrassing for me, the young lady and her husband, who was sitting that dance out at our table. Shelley grabbed the nearest guy to her and asked him to take her home and stay with her. Actually, he refused, as he was another member of the party I was with. But I have refused to acknowledge her presence or speak to her since. Almost 2 years had passed since the divorce. Mick was home from college and still looking for a permanent job. Why are kids so selective nowadays? Danielle was home for the Easter holidays, and we'd taken a drive out in the country looking for a different pub to grab a meal in. It was Danielle who first noticed Mick eyeing up the waitress, and she made some comment to him. "Well, she is pretty. I think I could fall for her," Mick replied. My attention drawn to her, I found the waitress's face familiar, and I had to think for a moment. Then I realized who she was. I remained silent on the issue until she came to take our order. "Hello, Anna, and how's your mother getting along?" I asked. For a moment, Anna, Mick, and Danielle were shocked into silence. My children had no idea how I could possibly know the charming young waitress, as I told them that I'd never been in this pub before, and Anna appeared to have no recollection of me either. But Anna soon recovered and tried to continue the conversation politely. "My mother's fine, thank you. Have you chosen what you'd like to eat?" "I think my son Mick would like to," Danielle exclaimed. "Actually, may I introduce you?" "Daddy, don't be so rude," Danielle exclaimed. Poor Anna had no idea what to say. "He's quite well educated and house-trained as well." Anna, and oh damn it, all the children had turned bright red for some reason or another. I sat there with a grin on my face. "Mr. Randall," Anna finally said. "Of course I remembered you now. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you. But you remember the name, though. Mother has talked about you a lot." "I'm flattered. But tell me, why are you working here, Anna?" "I thought you worked in the garage with your mother. There isn't much profit in selling gas nowadays. We'd managed to keep the filling station open, but without the garage, we are struggling. This doesn't pay much, but it helps. Let's see, your brother was planning to reopen the workshop, wasn't he?" "Well, if we can hang on until he finishes his training, yes, that's what he wants to do." I turned and looked at Mick. "Well, how'd you fancy working in a country garage, Mick?" "Oh, the bonus could be that you get to see Anna here every day. And I think the place would come with an enthusiastic apprentice." "What do you think, Anna? Mick's qualified, and he hasn't found a garage he likes working in yet." "I'm not sure. You'd have to speak to Mother." "We will do that right after our meal." We ordered, and during the meal, I told my children about my evening with Nat. Oh, and I offered to let them see the DVDs of that evening as well. Wouldn't like them to get the wrong idea of their father. It was Danielle's turn to surprise me. Apparently, she'd come across the DVDs in my computer desk drawer and had watched them through time and again, trying to understand why I had them. We were still eating when Danielle said, "Oh, looks like you've got company, Father." I turned to see where Danielle was looking, and there was Nat, just coming through the door. I must say, she looked good squeezed into those jeans. I was on my feet before she saw me. With a big smile, she walked over to me and gave me an even bigger hug. "I didn't think you were ever coming back," Nat said. "Damn it, the woman was crying." "Oh, so was I. I didn't want you to think I was on the rebound," I said to her. "Damn it, man, I wouldn't have cared." "Dad, this is embarrassing. Everybody is looking at you. Will you two sit down, please?" Danielle, whom I'd had to watch as she acted so passionately over the previous couple of years, had the audacity to say to me, "Okay, where do we go from here? Is there any point in giving you the long story?" Nat and I were married 4 months later and live in the bungalow beside the garage. Mick is living in a mobile home at the moment. We're waiting for planning permission to be granted for a second bungalow for him. The garage is doing fine now. Some foreign investor put a lot of cash into the place so that it could be modernized, and there isn't any overdraft for Nat to worry about anymore. Damn guy doesn't seem to be in any hurry for any dividend on his investment either. Peter and Danielle get all gooey-eyed and tongue-tied around each other, but as Danielle is away playing with her orchestra most of the time, they don't get together very often. They do spend a fortune on phone calls, though. Nat and I have high hopes for them. We'll have to wait and see what happens on that one. Shelley? Well, she has bought a little cottage in the village, and she works as a cleaner and waitress in the pub. I don't think it pays much, but she gets to see Mick quite a lot. I still don't speak to her, but Nat does. Nat tells me that Shelley knows what she lost. David. Now here's where things really get weird. His wife divorced him, and she stayed with and then married a colleague of mine. From what I can understand, David moved in with his brother and Karen. But the next thing you know, the police are around asking where I was on one particular evening. Oh, they'd been around after David had his problems in the car park as well. This time things were a little more serious. David had been run down by a car. The police thought he would never walk again. I think someone said he was walking on crutches now, though. But here's the kicker. He's living in Karen's house, and apparently Tom is on the run from the law with an attempted charge hanging over him. Have you any idea just how much it costs getting a wanted man out of the country? Canada is a big country, I'm told. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.